All right, welcome to Legally Everywhere with Child. Y'all know we are legally everywhere, looking into everything. I had a slight technical, but we will continue to navigate because what, child, we are back. I have an update for y'all. I have, listen, I had an update to the update, and that's the part I'm super excited about. We actually have an update on this case related to access, right? And we know that's been the whole thing, right? So I actually was able to access the official Mississippi electric court system and locate this estate proceeding directly. Because I heard some stuff online, and y'all know how I am. That's just not going to cut it for me. So, without further ado, I'm actually going to go ahead and present to y'all this information because, baby, like we really finna get into these receipts. Let me pull this up on my computer. So let me kind of explain to you the process before I start jumping into all of the pieces. The computer just didn't want to let me be great today, but listen, we wasn't having that either. Now, were we? We weren't having that. Let's make sure this light still doing, see? It's doing that flickering thing, and I don't want that to trigger like epileptic seizures in anybody, so I was trying to get that to temperature check and do a little bit better. But child, we are here. Trying to make sure I control the overall visual output. Can you all see that? Can you all see that? Okay. Okay. So I want y'all to go ahead and see. I was able to actually locate, as I said, the actual document, and I flipped it so y'all can actually read it. Listen, I told y'all, getting all into these receipts. And you can see this very top one certifying that I actually got into the Mississippi electric court system. Okay? So this is the actual court setup. This is the actual subpoena. And that's what we're going to talk about this evening. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the process that I took to access this information, because this particular part of the information is accessible, is considered like open to the public. But once again, I like to make sure I respect boundaries and processes. So I'm going to try to explain as much as I can in case someone else wants to ever go and verify information so they can do it on their own. I'm going to actually give you certain screenshots and certain images and all of that. So basically, you know, as always, stick with me. I'm going to break it all down. But once again, there is some information I'm going to discuss briefly that I came across, and I'm going to tell you why I didn't show it to you or why I didn't provide it to you, just because I think that's fair to do. I'm not ever going to expose people's personal information. I'm not going to expose something I don't think needs to actually be addressed. So in those situations, like I said, I'm going to just talk about it, and I'm not going to visually show you things. So if you don't see something, that potentially could be why. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and display it because, you know, that's fair to do. Okay? Sounds fair. I see some people jumping in and out. If it's your first time on the live, I want you to give me a smiley face. If you've been here before, give me a thumbs up so I know who's in the room. I never know who's in the room. I just see how many people are here. So unless you put something in the comments, so go ahead, drop some things in the comments. We are pretty much all set as far as the background. Y'all can see, once again, for those who have just popped in, this is the official subpoena, okay? This is the official subpoena. This is the court system. Make sure y'all can see that. Okay. You got it? We got it. Okay. So basically what we're going to do today is we're going to walk through the process that I use to locate this case. Because once again, y'all know how I am. I feel on social media and people be talking. And they be talking real good, don't they? They talk real. It all sound real good online until you start trying to verify some of the things that people are saying. I'm like, okay, where is that? Show us the document. Produce it. And then all of a sudden, crickets, crickets, crickets. Okay? This family has already been going through enough, you know? So I feel like if things are going to be online, like, I prefer them to be, like, accurate things. And I would like to be a part of the discussion where people are actually trying to help and bring attention, you know, in a very respectful and mannered way. So the family did say, the mother specifically, she wants people out there advocating. She wants people to continue to vocalize his name. She wants us to continue to help her fight, you know, for justice for her son. Right? So as someone in the community, right, I just feel like, hey, anything that I can do to help bring unity to the community, whatever I can do to help that family, you know, be able to get a step closer to justice, I would like to do. But also for my own knowledge, for the knowledge of the community, I think it's cool that we kind of get to see what that process is like, to try to maybe access information, to verify information, to understand information, to like look at it for ourselves. I am not someone who likes to just look at headlines. That is not my thing. I just don't agree with that, because sometimes they can be misleading. They can be misleading, right? Just like sometimes even data can be misleading. If you gave me data when my younger days and I did data analysis, yeah, I could look at some information and I could tell a few different stories because it's about the context. So I would like to read what the documents. I would like to see the documents. Basically what produced the documents. So y'all like, you talking about producing documents, but you still talking. So here we go. Look. Let me pull this up. Because like I said, this is the court public access system. So there are certain things that you can see, and I will make that viewable. There will be things that I'm not allowed to access or that I'm not allowed to show. And once again, like I said, I will show you that. But essentially at this point, we're going to be talking about the fact that Nolan's mother, right, she requested, or basically at this point, she had a subpoena put in against Cito. Now, that doesn't mean just because she did a subpoena that they have produced anything yet. Doesn't mean that it necessarily will produce, right? But at this point, at least I can verify that she did, in fact, put the subpoena in. So the question might be like, why was I even digging into that? And we're about to get into that whole part as well, right? We're going to get into that whole part as well. Let's see if we can get this to go this way. Okay. I have to put my PowerPoint back up just to make sure that I am lining up with what y'all can see as well. Okay. So we're pretty much, like I said, we're going to walk through pretty much Exhibit A. But that includes, let's see, so the request, actually, I'm just going to tell you what the document says because I'm not going to show you the whole 7-page. So it includes a request for things that involve the incident call, the recording, the dispatch, the CRM records. Let me pull this over. Decisions about where to dispatch, transfer, escalations, cancel, or close the call, close the request pretty much. Relevant policies, training materials, information identifying the people, entities, and systems involved in handling the communications. So that's what they asked for when her legal team, but basically Nolan's mother on behalf of like the estate of Nolan Wells. So that whole, we'll just say for the point of conversation, Nolan's mother, but it's officially acknowledged as the estate of Nolan Wells. Okay. And then her legal team. So once again, I'll just list off that list again, just because I know I kind of jumped through that information. So that request involved what? Incident calls, recordings, dispatch, CRM records, decisions about whether to dispatch, transfer, the escalation, call or close the request. So she wants basically the information, because if you remember in that recording, right, it was like, oh, it canceled. Okay, so we want information about that. Relevant policies, right? What's the policy that you have around, X actions, right? What's the training material state? So we already kind of see where this is going, right? Okay. And then information identifying the people, entities, and systems involved in handling the communications. So anybody's hands that was touching it, she said, I want to see it. Produce that. My generation, we say 8, but, 6, 7, 8, but the kids kind of do this as 8. Whole nother thing. But, I was like, okay, very nice. Good movements as far as where I sit that the team did really good, So let's see. I want to talk about some of the boundary pieces. So let me pull that up I was like, yes, I'm so happy to actually see that they're, the movements, because it's something that had a lot of us in the community concerned. We're like, what's happening with this case? And that's another reason why I kind of dove in a specific kind of way. So as far as this piece, let me put this where y'all can see her, because I did work on her. Went looking for, right? These are things I went looking for. But also I wanted to clarify what to not assume. So I'm going to show you this piece. I'm going to come a little closer. Looking for like who received the subpoenas, right? What category of records was requested, whether services or an objection appeared, right? Not to like assume the records were produced per se, because once again, this just happened, right? So they probably didn't produce it quite yet because they have X amount of time, which I can also tell you the exact date for that too. But we're not going to assume that the records were actually produced already. What the records contained, that a request proves a theory, right? We don't know that it proves a theory, right? So we don't assume that it proves a theory, but we also know that more than likely this is laying some foundation down to get certain kinds of information, right? Don't people saying I said anything. So we're not gonna say it proves a theory by just merely getting the information, but we certainly know what they're gonna get some receipts, they're gonna get some information. Who was touching the paperwork related to this case, right? Go back into it, right? Just to clarify, right? She's asking who closed the request, canceled it, escalated, who was involved in that communication. What's your policy? What's your policy around these kinds of incident actions, movements? What are the policies? What's the training manual say? Okay, because we're going to look for what alignment with that and inconsistency possibly with what actually occurred. Now, my thought, and this is my thought right here, even though yesterday we discussed what I found out about Horn Island being what mostly federal property, but having that about 5% that's private, still with it being 90+% federal, it just seemed like the Coast Guard should have been called, right? It seemed like there should have been some involvement because so much of the property actually was governmental. So I'm thinking in my mind that might be something they're looking into, like, well, why wasn't other authorities involved? My other thought was, when we listened to the call, whether you listen to the enhanced version or the initial version that you heard, we heard them clearly say, oh, it's sinking. If somebody calls you and they're supposed to be in distress, I'm not saying they vocally sounded in distress, but verbally what you vocalized was, oh, it's sinking. It seems like you would just send out some help anyway. You wouldn't just cancel that. Nobody would want to just sit with that kind of liability on their back, would they? Like, hey, somebody called me, said X, Y, and Z is happening. I'm not going to do some type of welfare check or investigate that further. So that always made me curious just myself, because I'm like, that's really odd. Audibly, what I heard, the way it was said, it was like almost a little too calm. It didn't sound like someone vocalizing distress. But the vernacular, like the way, the words that the diction, like the words he chose, were indicators of distress. So if you're calling an emergency place and you're vocalizing words in terms of distress, you would send somebody. You wouldn't say, hey, I'm going to send somebody. You know what? Nope, I'm not going to go ahead and do that. It's odd. So when I saw the request for relevant policies and training materials, that's where my mind kind of went. What y'all thinking? Go ahead and put in the chat. When you hear that, am I the only one that had that kind of thought? Because that was part of my mental process of why I was looking into this information. I'm like, okay. So that was interesting. Then once again, always, who handled the cases, like the communications? Because generally, now most of my background professionally was in the medical, so it's like you don't just touch somebody's case without there being something notated in the system. Every time you touch somebody's file, as long as it's an electronic, right? It wasn't a paper file, you could track that someone touched it. So my thought was there's some type of record of tracking that she's trying to also collect as well, like who all touched it, because these are all people who could potentially be involved, potentially have something to include into the conversation. Y'all know I'm always talking about where pieces of the puzzle. Now that portion is just my thought. We're about to jump right back in to some other pieces, because I do think it's kind of significant to talk about some of the boundaries that I was encountering as I interacted with the system. Let's see if it'll let me show y'all that way. Okay. Let me see if I can do it this way, y'all. So I'm about to show it. I'm just kind of pulling up my PowerPoint to make it accessible for you guys. I had to flip the image, which means when I look back, it's backwards for me, but hopefully it looks really good for you guys. Okay? Can y'all still see it? Okay. So, right here, just to explain the process a little bit further. I'm gonna go from here and work my way down. So you have like the public screenshot, which I'm actually gonna show you. I'm gonna show you each one of these steps as their own little slide. But you have the public screenshot. So basically I have the timestamp subpoena, which has the exact case number. And then you have like your free county search, which I did that. I looked for the family name. So this part 2 is the one where I'm actually not gonna give you a visual for that. I'm just going to explain. So that was the second part in that process. I went to go look it up. I could not find anything under the Wells family. I could not find anything under the Wansley last name that I thought was connected directly to the mother, right? Because we have the mother's first name, which is Christine. I found some names, but not that one, right? So that wouldn't be relevant to the search. I was just trying to find things very specific to this specific case. So there was no need to show any of that process, because those are people outside of this, and there's no need to include any of that information. But you know, it was something that was observable, right? What I wanted very specifically was I knew the name was going to be the estate of Nolan Wells, right? So if I could not find that I wasn't going to produce it on the screen. So that would be part 2 in this process. Can y'all see that? Sorry, my hand. So then you have the PAME registration, which is basically to access the Mississippi docket. And of course, I would have to go about that process as a non-attorney and set up an account, and then be able to go from there to be able to verify. And then, you know, at that point, following is the boundaries that they give us, but then also, you know, outside just the boundaries and ethics that they would apply, the ones I would apply within myself. There's just certain things I'm not going to do with the information, but they also outline things that you're not supposed to do with certain information. You can use, how you can use it. I'm going to show you that on here as well. Y'all see that? Okay. So I see some movement in the chat. Hi, Jeffrey. Hi, Alfreda. Hi, Pretty Prince. How are you all? Thank you so much for being on this live. Thank you for engaging with the chat. Chats always are very helpful to me because it allows me to know that y'all are in the room. So that's super helpful, okay? I'm also going to move us to the next piece. But before I officially jump in, like I said, I want to just make sure that we talk about the importance of like the boundaries. This is an open, active investigation. You read the news clips, even the most recent ones are saying this is open, active investigation. The DA, which I will actually show a clipping from them a little bit later, they spoke about how the autopsy information is something they're going to keep private, right? She also, while I'm here, I guess I'll just speak on it right now, and then I'll bring it back up a little bit later. She also spoke about in her statement, you know, that she doesn't have certain liberties that an individual would have, right? I'm an individual. I presume the people who are on the other end of the screen are, you know, individuals, right? So there are certain liberties that we have as individuals, certain freedoms that we have to pull information and maybe speak on things with a certain level of freedom that she as a DA may not be able to speak on in her department, in her, let's just say, office, may not be able to speak on. But the article went further to say, just because, you know, we don't hear certain things from them doesn't mean that they aren't actively moving, investigating, and looking into the events. So to me, that was somewhat promising, that particular element, right? But the piece that really stuck out to me was the power of the individual, the power of the community, right? Because what I heard was, you know, maybe I can't speak about it as a DA, right? Maybe my office can't really speak on certain things, but an individual might. So then the power of what these social investigators online who are looking into things based off what is publicly accessible, right? Because certain investigations and certain legal processes should go as they are supposed to go. But there are other pieces that have been made accessible. And you'd be surprised, especially as we're seeing in this social media era, right? And I say that even as a millennial, I feel like we're the beginning of that. But like as things are now, we have even seen more recently in some other cases, right? Where sometimes you have these social investigators, right? These people who maybe it seems like it's social media or it's whatever, right? They start to investigating things and they come across really unique ideas, or they see something that maybe these trained professionals didn't see, or they didn't put it through that lens, right? They didn't put it through that view. And now that they have, you know, tuned the scope to kind of look in and see, they're like, oh, you know what? They presented it that way. And now that we see it that way, we want to investigate it again from a different angle. We have this other thing that we can look at and expand upon. So I love the fact that when I read the same liberties as an individual, I felt empowered. I felt as a community we should feel empowered. But do it responsibly. Do it respectfully, right? We shouldn't be just putting certain information out that could potentially harm the family. Like I said, the Wells family, they have a younger, Nolan Wells had a younger brother. He also is being exposed to this at whatever level he's being exposed, because most of his age, I presume, probably has social media. So it's like, respectfully, right? Not just his parents, but his younger sibling is navigating this as a younger person, and it's also public, right? So as I kind of go through this, I try to go through it responsibly, respectfully, but also in a way that I can learn. And then I share the things that I come across so that other people may learn too. If you're ever sitting there with some information, you're like, hey, this doesn't make sense, you can feel empowered to make it make sense. Look into the information. So that's kind of, once again, how I got to this point. The more I kept coming across them, I'm like, I need to just look that up myself. I'm not going to wait. That's how we got here. Okay, so I'm going to show you this one. This brings us to part 3 out that 4 that you just saw. This is how that looked online, right? So you just put the party's name, you know, you search it, case number. Once again, I said I saw that somebody put something online, so I went to go verify what they provided. I wasn't kind of going into it blind, so that's helpful. Sometimes if you don't have special identifiers, it can make it difficult. The case number definitely can be helpful. The party name is probably a little bit more, you know, explanatory, but the petitioner's name, usually explanatory. Usually you know those pieces of information, but sometimes having the actual case number itself may be a little bit of an obstacle for some people. So once again, I had that because of what I saw online, because I was going to verify, is this accurate, is this real? So that made this a little bit easier to navigate. I think if I didn't have that, it would have took longer, right? That's being transparent. Keep it in mind, right? I'm telling you, even with that, at this particular stage, I didn't actually access the information. For some reason, the system just would not allow me. I don't know what's going on with the system, but it just would not. I used the mother's maiden name. I used his name because I knew she was the petitioner. I used his, knowing that he was the party being referenced. I could not get anything to generate. I was working on that for a hot minute. And keep in mind, you have the case number. It still didn't generate for me. Which, once again, I found kind of interesting, right? Found that kind of interesting. So that kind of forced me to have to go through this process here. I also just want to say, as I am showing that this is currently, you know, the case, and I kind of told you at the beginning that this was focused on the CTO subpoena, you know, for certain records. That doesn't inherently confirm, once again, that, you know, they produced that information. Or any of that. It doesn't show us like the responses, you know, that they made to it. It's just showing right now that this was put in place. That's where we kind of are, especially given, like, once again, the date of it. And I'm gonna put this here really quick. Were you guys able to see that? I know some people like to take a quick screenshot. Were you able to get that? So this is that document. Okay. So at this point, that's where we kind of get to start to follow the public record. And now I can actually give us more regular updates and things to verify. So obviously, as we move forward, you know, to stay tuned. But I wanted to make sure that before I even jumped in that, I just kind of really put the foundation down for y'all, that I wanted to show y'all public records without actually exposing sensitive, like, family information, in any way, like interfering with any type of investigative, like, situations, or I don't want to ever, like, treat a request, you know, like it's an established fact, or that, you know, an allegation of something, you know, necessarily details that, you know, X, Y, and Z occurred. I just once again want to say, feel empowered to investigate certain things on your own, because just because it's said doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. Just because it's said doesn't mean it's not true, right? Feel empowered to investigate things on your own and kind of compare and contrast. You get a headline, it's like, oh my goodness, what is that? Exactly, what is it? You know, like, let's look into that. What can we find out? Like, what's supported, what's not supported, what's incongruent? Like, are there inconsistencies? There is quite a bit of information that's not going to probably be accessible to us for quite some time, right? Because we also know some stuff is going to be presented to, like, a grand jury, so certain information we're not going to be able to see because it's supposed to be withheld. But for the things that we can see, we gonna see it. So let me show y'all the next page, which is, once you get that page set up, you're gonna get a page like this. Let me make sure I can see that y'all see that. Okay, so this page right here, that outlines basically the different things that you can access, how you can access it, what you can do with it. And you do have to sign off that you will, you know, commit to that, right? So basically, if you look here, just kind of gives you the quick little setup. What we can actually access, which will be, with regards to his case, will be the the estate information and the unsealed criminal case information. So we can get quite a bit, but keeping in mind certain stuff we won't be able to access. And that's the pieces down here, right? So no public docket entries or documents. There's certain things like really specific. I might actually at some point take this particular document, blow it up, and read it to y'all. And then there's some restricted stuff like online docket information, clerk public, terminals and stuff like that. So that's pretty good. You know what? I'm going to do y'all a solid. I'm going to pull this up and read it really quick. Let me see. We have normal access case viewable, right? Accounting, agency appeal, adverse possession, bad faith bond validation. Let's see, breach of contract. Let's go to the stuff that might be a little bit more applicable. Habeas corpus. Let's say intentional store and it's a estate. Let's see. I had put those two, but there was something else I wanted to show y'all that was on here that would count. For the most part, the ones I outlined on this corner right here are the pieces, but there was something I wanted to show y'all. Maybe I already have it embedded in the next part. But this section right here is the things that we'll be able to access relevant to Nolan's case throughout this process. So if I see something, I'm gonna look to see if it can be verified against, this and other places, right? And other places. But obviously if something's sealed, I'm not gonna touch it. I told you I always try to put things that can be accessed, generally in the public. Obviously my preference is always open access things. But since it's something that can be in the public with consideration, right? I'll always consider those considerations and then, present accordingly. So let me put that back. We're gonna go very quickly to the article I told y'all about. This was the DA's statement. So the part, like I said, that really kind of stuck out to me was the statement describes limits on publicly discussing verified information, witnesses, testing, and investigative material, because a lot of people are talking about the autopsy, and says the complete investigation is intended for the grand jury presentation. So this specific information gap, right, helps explain, in my opinion, like I was saying earlier, why the everyday person, like leveraging their voice and speaking on a thing, certain things can be actually helpful, right? I just think about the one social investigator, J. Megan, who had her but had her TikTok it got flagged, somehow it got banned, but it's actually back up as of yesterday. The investigative work that she did relevant to people being able to make certain connections and coming across things, right? Before she was speaking about it, I don't think anyone was talking about the fact that there were possibly 4 boats, right? We were really just kind of talking about the 2 boats that were discussed and maybe some other kind of smaller boat. But after some time and some social investigation work that she was doing, plotting and laying certain things, there's been discussion in the public, right, about a 4th boat. Do we know what they're doing as far as the official investigative team? No, we don't. But what we saw, we can't unsee, right? The creator, No, they asked us not to mention their handles anymore. So there's a creator who did the Bratz doll demonstration relevant to another case that's happening currently, but they're actually in court. Her demonstration impacted a lot of people as to show certain things were what they were inconsistent. She recreated everything that they were saying in trial with Bratz dolls, down to the blood splatters, right? Where they should fall, like the inconsistencies of like how that looks. If the splatter is here, why is the table on top of it? Because if it splatters, it wouldn't be on top of it, right? It might be adjacent to, but it wouldn't be like right on top. That suggests something was moved, which would indicate, right, further investigation or maybe still needed, right? But at that stage, you know, that's a whole different ball game. But literally, that video actually got snatched down. Lots of people who were able to collect that, but it just speaks to the power of the community. When you see something, you know, you are supposed to report those things out. You are supposed to try to seek justice. You're supposed to take justice into your own hands, like a vigilante of some sort. And no one's saying to do that. Someone's saying to leverage your voice to bring attention to issues and concerns and say, hey, we would like to hold people accountable. What we want, transparency. We want accountability. If we see something doesn't look right, we have a right to ask them to uphold it. Especially when you're talking about like criminal offenses, right? That's a public concern and issue, right? So I personally, when I read it, I felt empowered to hear that there is power in being an individual. Because sometimes we always think about the power, like the power imbalance that comes with people being in privileged positions, like a DA or a lawyer or a judge. There's so much power behind the roles that they sit in, right? There's so much power that people forget that as an individual, you have power too. You have power too. And she kind of spoke about some of those liberties that we have that a lot of times people don't think about. So I'm always someone thinking about power dynamics. That's just very interesting and salient to me. And I was like, man, let me kind of expand on that. So that was just something I wanted to kind of bring up just very briefly. Y'all, like, I really want to see the document, so let me get to it. So this is page, so document number 29 is what I pulled. Spent a couple coins, got y'all's little document. It was filed 2 days ago, so it was filed on August 20th. A subpoena here, so it's the type. Let me come back over here. And it's the CTO Service International under the case of the state of Nolan Wells. Okay? This is exactly right here for those who like to get an image. That is exactly what it looks like. I was like, let me be nice and not be putting my logo all over so y'all can actually see that and get a nice clean copy if you are choosing to screenshot. So sometimes it is kind of hard to look at the document people and put their handles and stuff all over it, right? But you see it states, the company, right? You are hereby commanded within 21 days from the receipt of the subpoena, but no sooner than 15 days from the receipt of the subpoena to produce and permit inspection and copying of the documents, electronically stored information, records, and tangible things designated in Exhibit A, and to deliver and securely transmit those materials to the counsel for the petitioner. Okay? Y'all can see that written there? Okay. And that was this area that I just read to you right here. Don't say I didn't come with receipts, y'all. Don't say I didn't come with the receipts. Because I told y'all I do. I spent a little bit of time making sure I could pull that together for y'all. I keep saying I'm going to do these earlier in the day like I normally did, but I like to get y'all the full receipt, and sometimes the systems be playing around with me, and I got to do a little extra. Okay. So What was that? Let's see. Does it connect? Okay. It cut off for a second. So while I wait for this to get back together, I'm actually going to show you the next page, which is Exhibit A. And in Exhibit A, it's pretty much asks CTO to produce those items that I outlined, which would be the incident calls, recordings, and call detail data, dispatch, CRMs, membership notes, and status records, decisions, look, the decision to dispatch, delay, transfer, escalate, cancel, and close. Like that whole process. They like, no, give it up. Policies, scripts. Because you know a lot of times people call your phone. Most people be working with scripts and stuff. Someone says X, like a playbook, so to speak. You're supposed to say Y, right? So policies, scripts, and emergency response standards. Training and franchise operating requirements, quality review, coaching, and corrective action records. Interesting, right? So if somebody was working with them, potentially they had a record of anything that looks suspicious, like we want to know what was their record, what was like the status of them, within the agency. Like if you all request it, go ahead, request it all, right? And identities, roles, systems, custodians, retention systems, all that, and settings. So I said, very, very interesting. Okay. Okay. So that is that. And then we're going to go to this part and we're almost done, y'all. So subpoena is like one procedural step, not the whole final answer. So like I said, requested. A subpoena identifies information to information a state like seeks to know. So that's this part right here. Hopefully y'all can see that. So then they get served. A return of service would show delivery to the recipient. Produce would be like compliance would show that responsive material was supplied. And then proved only later analysis, right? Admissibility, fact finding, established significance, right? So public screenshot. So what we are at this stage, we at point 1, requested. And that was as of 2 days ago, and we saw that more than likely we might be able to check back and see something within 15 to 21 days, right? And we're day 2 of that process, right? Potential process, because once again, it's supposed to be from when they get it, but not to be later within that time frame, right? So let me show you my reporting boundaries. So public procedural transparency. So I can explain what appears on the dockets, identify a filed request, and distinguish each procedural step, right? I can do that, right? Private investigative substance, I will not expose people's personal information. I told y'all that. Try to speculate about unseen returns or interfere with active investigations, because we ain't trying to have no problems. You know what I'm saying? The goal is just to follow the legal process and be empowered, to leverage our voice, be a part of the unity, that we're supposed to be bringing to the community, right? The family was saying, hey, we need help, we need answers. Because what if that was your child, What if that was your family? You would want people to try to help. We always say people don't help, people don't help. We should be trying to help. We should all be trying to help. If nothing else, try not to be a part of the problem. So what would count as the next public movement, right? Oh, y'all don't see that one. Right? And follow findings, respect the boundaries. That was what tonight's focus was. Follow findings, respect the boundaries. Any questions so far? Any questions? Tonight wasn't about like what does this prove, but like I guess the more proper question for where we're at was what procedural steps has occurred and what information is the state attempting to obtain. Like that's the receipt. The receipt is a mom who said, I need answers about what's happening to my baby or what happened to my baby. She got a legal team. She got people to bring attention to it, and she is now, subpoenaing certain information from what, as we call it on the Legally Everywhere framework, a strategic actor, right? This tow company was noted to be involved, right? We saw that their name has been referenced quite a bit. So she said, hey, we want to subpoena some information. All right. And I didn't just tell you, oh, I heard this, I saw that. I went in and I found the receipt for y'all. And now we can start to line things up. I told y'all when we talk about reliability of information, right? That was secondhand from somebody else. It appeared to have official seals. But once again, we live in a day and age where certain things can be AI generated or manufactured. So for me, I said I want to take the secondary source and see if I can make it primary. I was able to make it primary. I was able to locate this document, and now we have something that's a little bit more reliable. Now, you might say for you, it still feels like secondary. If that's the case, I just gave you the process so that you can start to verify it on your own. If not, and you saw already, then you can take my word for it. But you don't have to, because what I gave you the process, I showed you how to go ahead and get it for yourself. Because it's nothing like being able to get it for yourself, right? So that was pretty much the project for today, okay? This is Legally Everywhere with Child. We Legally Everywhere looking into everything. If you liked the content today, if you found this helpful, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe. I really appreciate when you guys engage with the chat because that allows YouTube to know that I am covering some content that people like, that, maybe it'd be a good idea to help me be able to expand and build this community out, which is what my goal is. I want to build out this community the best I can. The best way to build it out is to engage with it, to interact, and to go ahead and subscribe so that when I am live, you get notifications. My goal is to start doing them a little early so y'all got to be up at the late night hours. But I had it now, and I was like, let me give it to them. Let me give it to them. I've been finding that y'all still will show up no matter what time I end up posting, which I appreciate because that really means y'all are part of my community, and y'all go ahead and respond to those notifications, and y'all see me on, y'all pop in. I appreciate y'all so much. Y'all are literally all over the globe as far as this community goes, like all over. And I just appreciate that no matter where people are, you guys make time and room to engage with my content and be a part of the community. I'm so happy to be able to share with you and say we are connected. Thank you for being on this live. It will be on replay and it will be on the channel. When I get an opportunity, I'll chop it up so y'all can get it in those nice little nuggets that people like to peruse through on the channel. Once again, this is Adrian from What Legally Everywhere, because y'all, we legally everywhere looking into everything. Thank you for being here, and you have a wonderful night, day, morning, whatever it is, wherever you are. Thank you, and see you I'm gonna see you in the next video. Till next time.